So today we'll finish up, but we'd already finished up the Congress, but we'll talk about the other legislatures today. The bell ringer was about what the benefits and problems of Congress. Hopefully, you took the reading and vocab quiz, and now we will finish the notes with other legislatures. And first, let's talk about the Pennsylvania General Assembly. It's important to remember that most of the state legislatures, especially Pennsylvania's, is virtually identical to Congress. So it's extremely similar. There's some slight differences. Obviously, one is that it meets in Harrisburg. Its House has 203 members instead of 435. $203. And the Senate has 50. So the Senate has 50. And not only that, but the Senate at the Pennsylvania level, they only have 4-year terms, unlike in DC where they have 6. So 4-year terms. And so because of that, I think you can do the math. Half are elected at once. So half are elected, then 2 years later the other half, and 2 years later they go back to the first group, and so on. Virtually everything else is the same as Congress. There's a Speaker of the House. There's the majority and minority leaders and whips. There's committees. The one difference, of course, is that we don't have a vice president of Pennsylvania. Does anybody know the synonymous position in the Pennsylvania government with a vice president? Does anybody know what it is? Yes? Governor? Lieutenant governor. So lieutenant governor is kind of like a vice president of Pennsylvania. So they lead the Senate. So just like the Senate in Washington, D.C. is led by the vice president, here it can be led by the lieutenant governor. And one difference between it and other state legislatures is that Pennsylvania, along with the other more populated states, have what we call full-time state legislatures. Full-time state legislature. So, in other words, that's the job they do all the time. Other states, they only meet a couple times a year. They don't get paid that much, and they don't concentrate on governing. Now, you might say, what's wrong with that? Well, that then means the executive branch basically gets to run the show all the time. The next one would be locally. Something I mentioned in the previous unit is executive and legislative powers are often combined. So, councils, boards, commissioners, and supervisors. Councils, boards, commissioners, and supervisors have legislative authority. Oh, yeah? For which township?
No, not like that kind of supervisor.
It's like a workplace supervisor?
Yeah.
Okay, she has no special legislative powers then. Only if she was.
Power to put the fear of God in others.
Yes. But only supervisors, of course, referring to township supervisors. And often, I mentioned this in the last unit, weak mayors, like the one in Titusville, are basically part of the legislative branch. The mayor in Titusville does not operate as an executive. That's true in other places like Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or New York City, but in Titusville, the mayor operates as part of the legislative branch. And then other countries. Just to finish up. Other countries have parliaments or national assemblies. Parliaments or national assemblies. And we mentioned in the last unit, sometimes the executive, like a prime minister, is part of the legislative branch. And the last item is some countries use what's called proportional representation. Proportional representation. What does that mean? Proportional representation is when a party gets a percentage of seats equal to the vote. So if, let's say, the Republican Party, let's say we had this system, got 55% of the votes, they would get 55% of the seats. So that's what proportional representation is. So they don't necessarily represent specific districts unless they're assigned to them. So that's just something a little bit different. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? So please make sure you submit your notes. And then for the remainder of the day, make sure you've turned in everything from Unit 4, taken the quizzes maybe twice. There's bonus current events assignment. And then next week will be the review and the test.